So I will introduce our speaker and topic here, which is researching sustainable innovations for the future. Can it benefit the consumer? And this will be presented here by Craig Davidson, who is the owner of Taurus Agricultural Marketing Incorporated. So I will read his bio here briefly as he's coming down. So Craig here, from the day Taurus opened its doors in 2001, Craig has been driven to help growers understand the whys behind the hows in agriculture. His goal has been to create a different kind of company, one that is focused on promoting innovative, scientifically backed technologies and leading-edge agronomic strategies based on education, knowledge, and data. Since then, he has been helping business-minded growers to benefit through Taurus's fact-first approach to farming. Today, that approach brings back the emotion and thoughtfulness that involves consumers and a cleaner earth for the future. As one of the presidents, Craig's approach to business is about boots on the ground versus feet up on a desk. He remains passionate about working with progressive farmers and industry professionals. Craig has spent his whole life in agriculture. Before founding Taurus, he served in senior management roles with fertilizer manufacturers on both sides of the border. He continues to be actively involved in a fifth-generation family farming operation in Macaulay, Manitoba. Please welcome Craig Davidson.
Right on. Test. Can you hear me? Good to go? Just going to grab a little water here to wet the whistle. All right. Well, good morning, and first off, thanks to...
Can you put this on? Yeah, if you can go outside the room, maybe Dan Owen? So if you guys can go out and speak outside the room, please, just so we don't interfere here this morning. Thank you.
All right. Yes, first off, just thanks to Manitoba Ag Days for having us here this morning. And I was actually on the board with the Ag Days community for the last 4 years, and they are a great group, and they do a tremendous job with this event here in Brandon, Manitoba. And so yes, it's good to be here on this side of the table this morning. Obviously today as well, a great group of presenters talking about not just today what's going on in agriculture, but really what we see as the future. And we do a number of talks, and you're always trying to come up with a title that's actually engaging and worthy of your time to be here for the next hour. But in our business as Taurus, and we've been around for the last close to 20 years here in Western Canada, and when we look at the success of our business, ultimately it's built on the backs of growers in our marketplace, and how you've been able to adopt and innovate and embrace new technologies and new solutions, and that has been the success of our business today. When we look at where we sit today in society and we look at the go forward, and I could almost say this word is actually probably to a point getting abused, this idea of being sustainable or being adaptive to the needs of society is something that I think we are paying more attention to, but we need to be more cognizant of the fact that it could be part of actually how we operate moving forward. And yet I look at this as an opportunity. And when we take these two words together, research and sustainable, I would almost throw down the gauntlet and say, are we, as an industry, as a research community, are we actually looking at ways to actually help tie our relationship closer together with consumers? And I would say, agriculture, farming, we're individuals. We like to do our own thing, and yet here's a huge opportunity for us to get closer to the people that really matter, and these are people that actually eat food. At Taurus, we, like I said, Over the last 20 years, we have brought a lot of technologies, a lot of solutions, a lot of innovations to the marketplace. Some have worked fantastic, some fell short. Maybe great technology, but logistically it didn't meet the needs of today's growers. And yet, we're always looking for something that can help you be more successful on the acre. Today and moving forward, as you build a business, as you grow a business, you create a vision for yourself, and I would encourage every operation to have a vision and a plan for the future. As you meet your goals, you have to reset your vision. Today for us, our goal as a business is every bushel harvested has a consumer-enjoyed story. And say, well, that seems odd, or that may seem lofty, and yet I say today, if we are really going to help our grower customers moving forward, ultimately it's about us getting you closer to the people that will pay good dollar, good value for the food that they're consuming. And yet I see a big disconnect in our marketplace that, they don't understand us and we maybe really don't understand them. Maybe there's an opportunity through research and how we do our research to actually build a bridge or connect those dots. So if we look at research and we look at innovation, can it benefit the consumer or involve the consumer? And in our world, I would say it's, statistically speaking, over the course of time, this is kind of what has evolved in agriculture, whereas based on the fact that we've done a very good job of adopting innovation, taking on new techniques, scaling the size of or how many acres we actually farm, there is way less farmers feeding way more people today, and this is an average of averages. In all reality, if we looked at the mean, that this number, it could be 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people being fed by one grower today in our space here in Western Canada. And that is fantastic. That is unbelievable, actually, to think of how far we've come in the last 70 years. And yet I could also say this is a little bit concerning for us in this room, meaning that if you say who has the voice and you look at this graphic, who has a greater voice? Now you're one person and there could be 3,000 people on the other side, meaning that it's tough. It's tough for us to show what we do, how we do it, and the positive impact we're having on society, because those 3,000 people on the other side, they maybe don't understand, or they don't start with science like we would. They would start with emotion and say, well, that's not fair, because we believe in science. We take a scientific approach to actually growing and understanding, our cropping systems. And yet I say, hey, here's a chance for us to turn the tables. This is fantastic. More people need to know what one farmer can do for society. And it's unbelievable, because here in our market, it's not 200 people. It is one large operation is feeding thousands of people today. We can look at consumer trends, and this is the reality of our market and what we are looking at. Today, if we look at a study done by Nielsen in 2016, they would tell us, basis their survey, that 66% of global consumers are willing to pay more for sustainable goods. So 2 out of 3 people would actually pay more. So these are people that aren't actually just looking for their next meal. These are people that actually have money to buy food. 2 out of 3 of those people would actually pay more than they're paying today if it had a sustainable feel to it. 80% of millennials, and I'm lucky I didn't realize this till I seen this slide, just fit into this category. I just fit into this millennial category, 1975 to 1995. Millennials are more keen to learn about how their food is produced. That's 80%. 80%. That's 4 out of 5 want to know how their food is produced. Are we telling them? Are we talking to them? I don't know. We don't even talk to our neighbors. We're scared to talk to our neighbors about what we're doing in our operation. 73% of consumers say that they would definitely change their consumption habits if it reduced their environmental impact. 3 out of 4. 3 out of 4 consumers that buy food would tell us that if that food they're eating reduced their environmental impact, they would do it. So are we listening? When we talk about research, and I'll say it for our own business, we love researching things. We love looking at ways to actually improve production. For the most part, when we look at that, our sole focus is on the grower. How do we help that grower be more successful? And yet today, when we look at statistics like this, we as a business have to look past that. You as growers or agronomists or consultants or retailers have to look past just growing a bushel. It has to be something that says, how do I actually give growers an opportunity to be more connected? Because consumers are asking and are prepared to pay more. I say this, there is one thing that absolutely connects us all, and our livelihoods, my livelihood depends on this. Society as a whole depends on this. We are in the business of agriculture because of this. And yet this is one thing that is getting lost in communication. We grow food. People in society that pay money or pay more money for food, really all they care about is this. They want to be healthy. They want to be putting the right things in their body to be healthy, to live longer because they love life. We want to grow good quality food and make sure people are healthy. And yet, we really don't know what we grew. We grew bushels. We grew wheat with high protein or low protein in 2019 because it rained on it for 6 weeks. This, to me, is a connective piece that we have an opportunity in research and agriculture to take it to the next level. Instead of just researching yield, why not start adding elements of nutrition into that data set? Instead of it's just grain, what's in that grain? What is the aspect that actually influences society in a positive way? This is a piece that I say is the future of research for us, connecting us closer to people that can spend money or pay more money on food. And I have this in here because it's funny. We went through the holiday season. My family, we stayed home, which was fantastic, and we ate like kings and queens every day. Turkeys and hams and roasted chickens and doing loins of beef. And at the end of the holidays, like, holy geez, I gained like 10 pounds in like 14 days. And my wife's like, we got to go on some kind of diet. And I'm like, I like eating. And so we're now in this diet that she wanted to do, and it's kind of funny. It's forcing me to actually read labels and say, what am I actually putting in my mouth? What's in that food? Well, what we know today, I mean, the vegetable industry has done a great job promoting the fact that it's not just nutrients, there's vitamins. I say that's something we can learn from when we promote the goods that we're producing. Let's take it one step further and talk about the true value that we're delivering. And I say, this building food trust, I mean, Dan did a great job of talking about analysis and what the future holds in agronomy and identifying soils. Today, as we know it, I mean, technology doesn't stop at agriculture. In the consumer world, there is already scanners and equipment that's being developed that allow consumers to walk into a grocery store and scan any food item, whether it's an apple or banana, and it'll tell exactly how much content and nutrients in that piece of food. So if it gets to that, that's tied to traceability. You can see where that food was produced, how it was produced, how they nurtured their land. All of a sudden, consumers are going to start to segregate growers very quickly. One basis, how well they grow that food, the nutrient concentration, the vitamin concentration, and how the land was nurtured or how you looked after it, whether or not you actually built a brand yourself. Does your farm have an image in agriculture or not? And this is happening. No different than Dan talked about. Technology is not slowing down, and it won't slow down. And it's not slowing down at the consumer level either. And as soon as this becomes commercialized and you're not prepared for it, you may find yourself on an island, because consumers will gravitate to growers that are prepared to look deeper into what they're growing and how they're going about to increase the nutrition. This is a reality of what's coming our way. So to look forward, sometimes I'll look back and say in 1969 we put a man on the moon. I mean, there's nothing more creative than people in this world. And yet today, 7 years later, all we've done is just put a man on the moon. And yet when I compare that to agriculture, going back to the 70s, the advent of industrialization, four-wheel drive tractors, it basically changed agriculture forever. The size, scale of farms changed when equipment scaled. And I would give farmers or growers credit, because you have been very open to accepting and adopting new technology. And I mean, today, where are we going with that? Well, tractors will no longer look like tractors. It may not be people in those vehicles. And this is happening now. This isn't futuristic. This is reality. So in 7 years' time, we put a man on the moon. We still just put a man on the moon. We actually haven't done it in recent times. In 7 years in agriculture, we've gone from scaling up to farming larger acres with industrial equipment to we may not even be in the field anymore. So when I talk to a room and I look at what you're capable of, and I say, hey, let's focus on sustainability, I believe you can, because this is one group of people in business that are prepared to change, and you have, immensely over the last 70 years. And ultimately, in our world, there is going to be a sensor for everything. And Dan talked about it. Real-time information in the field, on the go, may not involve people, but we will be dialed in. So why stop there? Why not take this one step further and dial this into actually what you're producing? Now, the challenge with this, when I talk about autonomous tractors and sensors for everything, if I'm a consumer, this doesn't make me feel warm and fuzzy. There's nothing emotional in this. This is still very industrious, right? This makes it feel a little bit empty or void, but this is reality of business. This is efficiencies. This is us dialing our business in right down to the penny. But for consumers, there's no emotional connection here. They don't relate to this. But what we do know is that consumers do, and they do today, they have a relationship with this. They believe in the earth. So they believe in the earth, meaning that when we talk about soil, they get warm and fuzzy about that. They like the idea that their food comes from the earth. It comes from soil. So I say, hey, why, we're not going to stop. We're not going to stop technology. And I say we have to embrace technology. I mean, the technology is fantastic that's coming our way. But let's also look at this. Let's say here's a connection point to people, and they love Earth. They love Earth. We love Earth. This is a growing point, a growing meeting for us. We're learning more about it. And in that Earth, one nutrient that we truly believe in at Taurus is phosphorus. Phosphorus is actually, none of us would be in this room. Your cat or dog, your livestock at home, insects that eat plants, the biology in the soil, none of this would be alive on this earth if we did not have phosphorus. None of it. So if we can start connecting this to society and say, hey, well, you can't be here, you can't live without phosphorus, and it comes from the earth, it's in our soil, it's important to us to grow the food that you need to eat to survive, and we know today in agriculture how important it is. When you decide to tell your agronomist or consultant, or you build a recommendation yourself and say, the genetics are there. let's do this. Let's grow 60 bushels of canola. Well, that 60 bushels of canola on an acre has to find 87 pounds of phosphate. And if you take the seed and you sell it and it leaves this country, you took 63 pounds of phosphate away. So how important is it? Well, it's extremely important because the target yields we have today, the potential we have with technology, genetics, fertility programs, is phosphorus is imperative. It's imperative to life on this earth, but it's imperative for us to get to where we need to go. Society doesn't know this. They don't understand this, but they understand that earth is important. Soil is important. But here's the situation. This is the situation that it's kind of funny. This is the situation that we are in right now. So if I'm in a city and I'm not connected to agriculture, I don't understand agriculture, they are aware of phosphorus. They are aware of phosphorus because this is what they're told. When they go to Grand Beach, right? Or, you go to Oak Lake, Manitoba, or Moosomin, Saskatchewan, and the lake turns green in the summertime, what people understand is there's one connection point, is that they know that is tied to phosphorus pollution. But the only connection that they actually have with that is that we know that growers use phosphorus or phosphate to grow their crops, and they over-fertilize, and it runs off, and it ends up in our waterways, and it causes pollution. And that can be true. And to a certain degree, it is true in areas, but in all reality, what they don't know is that a high percentage, a big portion of that pollution is actually coming from themselves. Because when we look at our whole system of livelihood on this earth, what most people take for granted is nothing ever leaves this earth. Unless we're sending some space junk into the atmosphere, when it comes to phosphorus, it never leaves this earth. We have just done a really good job of compiling it in places where it is actually bringing no value to society. And over the course of time, we as a society have chosen to live close together. We love living beside each other. And more, and this isn't going to stop, more and more concentration of people living side by side. And today I'd say, they blame agriculture. They blame, cattle and concentrate. And, fair enough, maybe they're not wrong. But our true feedlots today are people. People living in urban settings. And this is, when we look at this can be our main cause of pollution when it comes to phosphorus, because where does it end up? We grow food, 60-some pounds in 60 bushels of canola. That goes somewhere. It ends up in canola oil, or maybe it's wheat, maybe it goes into bread, maybe it's peas, maybe it's going into a Beyond Meat burger. People consume that, and it ends up, there is bypass, it ends up somewhere, right? What do they do with it? For the most part, they do the best they can, but most urban centers, most municipal wastewater treatment facilities, I grew up in a town of 86 people in western Manitoba. 86 people, they have a lagoon. What happens when that lagoon gets full? It gets pumped into Scissors Creek. Where does Scissors Creek go? It goes into the Assiniboine River. Where does the Assiniboine River go? It runs to Winnipeg and goes into the Red River. So all of us, when it comes to phosphorus, have we done our part? And I would say no, because it never leaves this earth. And yet, here's the conundrum. We cannot continue to increase production without it. Society can't be around without it. And yet, one of our greatest pollutants on this earth moving forward is actually phosphorus. Because it can contaminate waterways, it can create blue-green algae, it can starve oxygen water. It's a major pollutant, and we have to do something about it. Well, luckily, there is a small little company out of Vancouver that has been focused in cooperation with UBC and their technology to actually find a way to actually capture phosphorus out of wastewater management or effluent extraction back into our waterways. And in all reality, if you've ever, this maybe isn't going to be exciting, but if you ever have a chance to tour a wastewater treatment facility, there is a tremendous amount of technology that goes on today. And there's been millions and billions invested into how to manage human waste, because it's such a huge deal with people, or it's billions of people on this earth living in concentration. And yet, with the best technology we have today, when most cities or municipal wastewater treatment plants are done with it, they will still put water back into the river or lake or ocean beside them, called clean water, that can contain upwards of 25 parts per million of phosphorus. Well, that is not good enough. Regulation would tell us that we need to be 2 parts per million or less. They're pumping in 25 parts per million. My example here is Austera. They're based in Vancouver. They've been around since 2005, 2006. They have yet to convince the city of Vancouver that they should be capturing their phosphorus before they put it into the Fraser that goes to the ocean, because they say, well, why would we care? It's going to the ocean. Nobody cares about that. And yet, with their technology that ultimately turns this struvite, magnesium phosphate product, into a fertilizer called Crystal Green, if they captured it just out of Vancouver alone, on an annual basis, they would produce enough Crystal Green out of Vancouver to fertilize roughly 600,000 acres. And it's not happening. And it's right here in Manitoba. We could say the same thing about the city of Winnipeg. They were legislated in 2008 by the province of Manitoba to clean up their wastewater, get the phosphorus out of it. Don't blame agriculture. Fix your own problem first. Here we are 12 years later. What has changed? Nothing. Thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of more tons of phosphorus from a city going into our lake. So what is Crystal Green? I mean, ultimately what I'm talking about here is phosphorus. And ultimately in our world, what drew us in, I mean, I'll give credit for us. When we heard about it, there's actually a retailer in Manitoba, Sugar Monroe, that was actually doing research on it on potatoes. And I will give credit as well to potato growers here in this province and consultants here in this province that were some of the first people to actually adopt this technology into mainstream agriculture as a phosphorus solution to actually help them get more phosphorus into their potato plants to increase production. And yet when we look at phosphorus, we look at phosphate, it's been around for a long, long time. We know how important it is. We say this is phosphorus, but it actually ultimately could be better if we truly understand the science and the agronomy and on where it fits and how it could help us with production. And today, we take this little company called Austera. They've been around since 2005, 2006. They have been able to, and this is slow, but ingrain their technology into a number of major cities in North America as well as Europe that is ultimately producing phosphorus. Instead of making it a pollutant, they're turning it back into nutrition to help us grow more crops. So we're actually creating this circular economy, bringing an important element of society back into the production of food. And I say, in this case, everybody is winning. Growers are winning because it's actually helping them grow better crops, and society is winning because we're actually helping people clean up pollution. If you look at our map of current production today, there's 17 cities in North America, 5 cities in Europe that are producing. In Western Canada, one of the first cities to adopt this Crystal Green Pearl reaction technology is actually Saskatoon. They've been producing since 2013. Edmonton is also now producing Crystal Green. Portage La Prairie was approved last fall. You say, why Portage? Well, Portage is not a big center for people, but Portage is now a major center for food production. So 2 potato processing facilities, a pea processing plant going in. And that processed water can actually be very high in phosphorus. Well, the city of Portage has to manage all that wastewater, meaning that if they capture it, It could be the poster boy for the true sustainable circular economy, whereas we already know today, and thanks to potato growers and potato consultants, we've actually had crystal green used on potatoes for the last 4 or 5 years. We take that area, we could actually put crystal green on potatoes, grow better potatoes, process those potatoes right in portage, take that wastewater, send it to the facility, capture the phosphorus, make crystal green, put that back on potatoes, say, wow, that is fantastic. That is a story that we have to tell people living in concentration. We are doing everything we can to do our part to make sure that we're not abusing the environment or hurting our land. We are actually putting it all back into making more food. So when I look at this map and what got us engaged, number one, when we first got involved, it was actually the science. It was, wow, this stuff looks intriguing. It's different than regular water-soluble phosphorus. But in the last 3 years, what has become more engaging for us is this connection point, the sustainable aspect that we could be part of a movement that actually can help everybody as a whole. And right now, there's 22. With their modeling, in North America alone, there's 10,000 wastewater treatment facilities that would fit, that could actually capture phosphorus as a waste and turn it back into nutrition. 10,000. Right now, there's 17. So there's room to grow. There's room to grow to a point where we could almost become self-sufficient if we actually captured all this phosphorus that's getting dumped into waterways that's providing zero value to anybody. So what is unique if we look at it from an agronomic perspective? We put on our scientific hat. Most all phosphates that are produced today in the world that are used in the production of agriculture are water-soluble based phosphates. 1152, S15, 40 rock. Name them. They're all water-soluble based, and that's fantastic. That is actually what plants need. They need an available source of phosphate to actually be taken in and utilized. The challenge with that is not so much the phosphate, it actually is our soil. Our soils themselves actually, they like that anion, and if we have a high level of cations, specifically calcium, it likes to tie that up. And if it ties it up, it may make it really tough for the plant to get that back. Crystal green, the way it's made, Ostera with their Pearl reactor, they actually inject magnesium into that waste stream of water. That magnesium actually crystallizes or forms a bond with that phosphorus, and that is actually how they build a crystal. As they keep that crystal in the reactor over time, you'll build a bigger crystal or a prill. Well, because it's made in water, crystal green as a magnesium phosphate, it is actually water insoluble. You could put it in a pail of water, you could spill it in your yard, and forever and a day, it will never change. Basis water alone. Solubilization is not part of its DNA. A little bit of solubility, but compared to everything else we have that's 100% soluble, two completely different products. Well, that doesn't make sense. How is it going to work if it is not soluble? And this is where it gets intriguing in our world, is that, well, if it's not soluble, we need something to solubilize it. And ultimately, we have something on this earth that does a fantastic job of solubilizing crystal green, and that is actually a plant. Plants exude acids, specifically in this case citric acid. That citric acid does a nice job of breaking that magnesium phosphate bond. So now you have a phosphorus source for your plants where the soil is actually not involved at all. We've taken soil out of the equation. You have a relationship now with your plant and crystal green fertilizer. Water-soluble fertilizer has to involve the soil. We don't know every situation or every field, but the ones that are calcareous, that becomes the issue. And typically we'd talk, Don Flayton had a thing the other day on Twitter that I read was quite interesting. If you have calcareous soil that's low in phosphorus, most of what you apply gets tied up. We say 10 to 25% of what you apply in a year could be used by the plant. The other, call it 75%, becomes bound in the soil to a cation. In the human body, if we look at one of the hardest substances in the human body, what would you think? Stupid question. The enamel on your teeth is predominantly made up of calcium phosphate. One of the hardest substances in the human body, and that's why we know when we bury you, and you maybe murdered somebody and we got to do a cold case 50 years later, we can dig you up and what do we find? Your teeth. Because calcium phosphate in enamel takes forever and a day to break down. We put phosphate in the soil that ties to calcium. What did you build? You made some teeth. Okay. Let's take teeth out of the equation. When we look at research done by North Dakota State University and in Manitoba, New Era Ag Research in Swan River, where they actually harvested the soil at the end of a growing season to see how much crystal green was left, what we were finding in potatoes done by NDSU was that of what was applied, 60% of what was applied got into the plant in the year of application. With New Era Ag Research in Swan River on canola, where they put it right in the seed row or sideband, they were seeing upwards of 77 to 80% of what was applied in the year of application actually got into the plant. So now we talk about a recovered nutrient that's been recycled that could be beneficial in agriculture. It's not water soluble. Water will not dissolve it. But if we put the plant in control and we go from 20 to 25% utilization upwards to 80, see, that is fantastic. That is innovation that is truly benefiting growers that are in areas that have challenging soils for phosphorus availability. The other side of it, and this is a challenge we face when we look at helping growers be more successful, ultimately it comes down to usually making recommendations that are more aggressive. We're going to ask you to put on more nutrients. One of the challenges we have with fertilizer is that it actually, most of our fertilizers contain a salt load. So we say, well, 60 bushels of canola, the recommendation today is 40 pounds or 50 pounds. We're actually taking 60 some away. Where are you going to put it? Well, we can't put it close to the seed because that salt that dissipates or dissolves out of that granule can be harmful. In the case of crystal green, what we're finding, yes, it has a salt index of 7. Ultimately, what we're seeing, though, is that when a plant root finds it, it basically falls in love with it. It'll proliferate roots around that granule and solubilize it and have no negative effect. This is a canola seed 5 days after it was planted. And it is falling in love with that crystal green granule. It is doing what it needs to solubilize that nutrient out of there and take it right into the plant. If that is MAP, 1152, typically what we see is there's a level of salt in 1152. That salt has to leave that granule, and we take sensitive crops like canola. What can that do? Well, there could be a pruning effect or an absolute death of that seedling. Typically, when we talk, seeding rates on canola, we're factoring in 30, 40, even 50% mortality. I say a portion or a bigger portion of that mortality actually comes from seed safety. Never more in a year than the year that we just came through, 2019, a drier spring across all of Western Canada. I would argue the delay, the setback, the loss, a high percentage of those deaths came from salt. From salt, because the salt actually, there wasn't enough moisture in that close proximity to the seed to dissipate that salt away. And it maybe didn't kill the plant, but it could have set the plant back or caused severe injury, stunting or lengthening out its life. Canola should have matured in 100 days. It took 120 or 130. So we can't increase our fertility programs without understanding the amount of salt load we're delivering. Soil health, this is soil health. If we can find ways to bring more nutrition without bringing salt, the health of our soil also comes into play in this conversation. So we talk about research and how important it is to us, and I will give Austere credit, a small company, a team of engineers that really don't understand agriculture. But in the early days, they believed that they needed to understand their product. They needed to understand if it actually had a fit or not. As we sit here today, we are now sitting on 9 years of research with this technology in agriculture. In the U.S., the first number of years, they worked predominantly with major agricultural universities. And in our market, in the last 4 or 5 years, we've been fortunate to have University of Manitoba. We're working with University of Guelph and local independent groups like Antera, AgriTruth, ICMS, AgQuest, New Era Ag Research Group, as well as Decisive, taking it one step further and actually looking at not just doing research trials, but actually looking at the variability in the field and putting Crystal Green in the areas of the field that could be most responsive, that could be most challenged with phosphorus. So our database today, I would say hundreds of research sites to understand where is the true fit. I mean, it's if we can actually deliver a phosphorus, and we understand. Actually, I always say this: when we learn where something doesn't work, then we'll tend to focus all our time on where it does. And we are actually at the point with Crystal Green as a phosphorus source, we pretty well know where it doesn't work or it doesn't offer the best value. And so we tend to focus all our time on where we see the best opportunity for a return for growers. And thanks to these groups that have been able to help define this. Today we have research on 10 crops, 10 major crops here that we would, not all, but mostly grow here in Western Canada. And behind this research, we've looked at things like soil pH, phosphorus levels in the soil, calcium levels in the soil. And ultimately, it's, if we were to define it basis analysis, Dan talked about the importance of analysis and real-time information. If we were to segregate our market as we know it from a soil perspective today, I'm either looking for high pH, call it 7.3 or higher, low pH, 6.4 or lower, and a phosphorus level of 20 parts per million or lower on a sodium bicarbonate test. If I was to isolate those soils in Western Canada alone, that would equate to about 77% of the land that's being farmed today in Western Canada that would fit that matrix. We are growing most of these crops on that land base, but also then I'd say there's roughly 23% of the acres that we would tell you that falls in a very moderate pH, say 6.5 to 7.2, that has, and probably if you soil tested those fields, they probably have higher levels of phosphorus. Those soils are less conducive to tying up the phosphate we're currently applying because they don't have the cations like aluminum or calcium that are causing us the issue. I'm not going to go through a whole bunch of research. Then there's lots. You can find it on our website, taurus.ag, or you can go to crystalgreen.com to access the huge database that we have. But ultimately, it's kind of funny, and that's what I love about research. You do a research project for a specific purpose, and it's kind of the stuff that you weren't looking for that comes out of it that becomes the most intriguing. Well, in our case, we're looking for yield. Ultimately, what we're finding is the huge benefit of seed safety. In every trial that's done where they've done plant stand counts in canola or wheat, we always see more plants, meaning the toxicity issue that's caused by regular fertilizer is absolutely real because Crystal Green isn't causing that death. And to a fault, I'd say in canola, if we kept our seeding rate the same and used Crystal Green in furrow, we may have too many plants. In a lot of our research trials, we said, geez, we were targeting 6 or 7, and we ended up with 13 plants per foot a row. So that's okay, but I don't want 13 plants per foot a row. That's too many. I'd rather have 6 or 7. So that's something we have to look at moving forward if you're using this technology. And the data's there, and it shows true on wheat. Wheat, on the other case, I get more plants. That's to our advantage. More main stems, less tillers. We could have production or increase in yield than that alone. But if there's one graph that we would use to say today, with all the research across all soil types, across a whole bunch of different crops, this is one that probably holds true the most, is that if you're in a situation where phosphorus tie-up is real, or you're challenged with phosphorus availability because of higher pH or low pH, that is ultimately where Crystal Green can offer the most economic value. It doesn't mean Crystal Green doesn't work at a pH of 6.5. Plants will still solubilize it, but your regular phosphate program is also going to do a very, very nice job in that zone. So using soil analysis is going to help us define the best fit. And like I said, in our statistical survey of our marketplace, that is over 3/4 of our land that we would have to farm in Western Canada. You know, if we look at, again, going forward, and this is in our marketplace in Manitoba, as we have over the years gone to more corn and soybeans, we've seen more planter applications of crops, meaning it's tougher to apply the fertilizer. And we've seen this move because there's no doubt we'd say our government extension is doing a really nice job to tell us the importance of phosphorus in crop production. And yet logistically, if we don't have a way to apply it when we plant our crop, we have seen this movement to actually spreading phosphate on the fall. And not just here, up and down the Red River Valley into North Dakota, lots of phosphate being broadcast as a means to try to get our phosphate on. Well, in 2017, North Dakota State University did this research study to say, well, if we put on phosphate in the fall, comparing DAP and MAP and Crystal Green, what actually is left available for a plant come spring? And we're doing it for the right intentions, the right reasons. We want to actually get phosphorus on so the plants can utilize it. But what they found from a fall application, come spring, come seeding time, if it was DAP or MAP 1152, of what was applied on a 2-inch band, there was really only 13 to 17% of what was applied left available for a plant. The other 85, 86, 87% was actually bound or tied up in the soil. If they broadcast that in their broadcast research, come spring, there was roughly only 5% of that 1152 left available for a crop to utilize. If it was Crystal Green that they banded at 2 inches, come spring, there was still 94% of what they applied was still there usable for a plant, for our plant to use or extract out of that magnesium phosphorus granule. So this is real. This is agronomy. This is what we're doing because we believe in phosphorus. We would not be broadcasting phosphorus if we didn't believe that we needed to be doing more or putting more on our soil. But it all comes back to this, and this is, we are polling our customers. We've seen this tremendous movement across a greater market since we got involved. And I'll give growers credit. I say this comes from a grower that's had success. He's farmed for 25 or 30 years. At this stage of his life, he is thinking about the next generation. He wants to see his kids be successful in farming because he's had success, but he also wants to do more. He is sick and tired of society blaming him for being a poor ambassador for society because we farm cold-heartedly and negatively, and yet he sees Crystal Green as an opportunity to be a connection point to people that buy and consume food. It may allow him to continue to farm successfully, or his son, the 5th generation, into the future, because he is actually using agronomic resources that actually benefit everybody. And that is noble, and yet for us, agronomically speaking, none of that matters unless a grower can make money by using this technology. But the bigger picture, for us as an agricultural community, we may not be able to even use phosphate in the next 10 years if society deems phosphorus as a pollutant. If they tell us we're sick of our waterways turning green, and the only reason they're green is because you fertilize fields, and we can't defend ourselves because we're 1 in 3,000, maybe our only way is to come back at them and say, wait a minute, we are truly helping you. We're taking a waste that you're creating, turning it into a piece of nutrition that actually helps us to grow crops. We are fixing a problem. Let us continue to do that. That may be the future of what we're faced with agriculture. And it's good to get this feedback from growers that are already successful, that are prepared to embrace sustainability and solutions that actually connect them closer to consumers. And we see it. We see it right across the market. It's no different than going to autonomous farming. Growers are innovative. Growers are adaptable. I see this no different, but I also see our research community needs to get on board in this mindset too. We can't just research yield and bushels anymore. It has to have a sustainable flair to it. It has to have a nutritional aspect to it to actually connect us closer together. A couple things to wrap up. You know, the other side that we look at in our business is actually this movement of understanding the soil. I mean, people believe in soil. People that don't understand agriculture believe in soil. And yet I'd say today, we don't understand soil. There is a lot of research going in to understand the living aspect of the soil, but it's just on the front edge of what the future holds. And there is tremendous opportunity in understanding the living aspect of the soil. And it is part of the challenge we face is it is extremely dynamic. You know, in a gram of soil, there can be 3 billion bacteria. There can be 1 million fungi, lots of fungi. And yet, with technology, we are now just starting to dissect what that can mean in crop production. And there is a frontier moving forward that we will become more dialed in. I mean, most large organizations in agriculture today, most companies are investing heavily in this area of biology or the understanding of the biology. And yet there's stuff we've had for 40 years. I mean, we have been using rhizobium, a bacteria, to grow pulse crops for a long, long time. And it has brought trillions and trillions of dollars of success to agriculture. Using bacteria to fix nitrogen. So that's pretty cool. We've had it for a long, long time. If we had to fertilize all those crops over that time, how many millions and billions of dollars of nitrogen would we have had to use? So this is real. This is coming. I would say there needs to be more research in this area. We are doing more research in this area, whether it's rhizobium symbiosis or mycorrhizal symbiosis. Understanding the living aspect of the soil is a challenge, but with technology, we will get this more dialed in moving forward, and there is upside potential here for us. And I do think this is something that can also connect us closer to consumers, because when we talk about biology or living organisms, this is from nature, or this is from soil. This is something that we already had. It's been here since the beginning of time. We could say mycorrhizae has been here for 450 million years. We just didn't understand it. We're starting to understand it today. And in our world, from a research perspective, we're saying, well, how do we take that and connect that to consumers? Well, today, instead of us just doing yield studies, say, how do we make that inoculant better? How do we help the grower produce more yield? We're actually looking at this and saying, what is the impact on the concentration of protein in that soybean? We're doing this research on peas. We're doing this research on faba beans. So if we have consumers that are now going to eat Beyond Meat that's based from pea protein or faba bean protein, and we can actually help increase the protein content in that grain with biology, so that's pretty damn cool. That's a pretty cool story that allows us to get closer to consumers. You're now eating something you believe you need. We're helping grow it, increasing the protein content with something that comes from nature. And that is a great story, a story we need to be telling. So we believe we are part of a growing movement reshaping how we collectively manage our planet's precious resources. And I would encourage everybody to have a blinders-off approach to this. I mean, there's talks today that also take us one step further into recycling human food waste. And you say, every opportunity we can look at this, we have to have an open mind. We are in a very small box in society. We're easy to pick on. And yet, I'm saying if we open our minds, there's tremendous tools, agronomic resources, solutions that we can be using today that help us grow better crops, increase the profitability in the bottom line, but also give us a chance to have a stronger voice and form a better relationship with people that actually eat food. And I would argue if the end goal is this, if we believe that by being a better steward of the land, focusing more aggressively on nutrition and using resources that are recycled, and the end product is more nutritious, this actually connects us all. There is no differentiation here between you or me or anybody that doesn't understand agriculture. We all understand that. We all want to live longer. If we love what we're doing and love this land, love this earth, it all comes back to nutrition. That is what we do for a living, is this. We don't understand it, but it's time for us to dig deeper and show what we're doing and how we impact society. So, researching sustainable innovations for the future, it is now. It's happening. Embrace what's available to us and keep an open mind moving forward. So with that, thanks for the time.
Thank you, Greg. We have time for a few questions. We have a few minutes. So I'm looking to the audience here, and I'll bring the mic to, yes, just hang on here.
Okay. Since the product is basically like bone, as you described, I'm just wondering if that would be picked up in a traditional soil test, like for what's available for the next year, and also just what retailers would the product be available through, if any?
Sorry, what was the first part of your question? Sorry.
Is it like, would you be able to test how much phos is in this, like since it's locked up in essentially with calcium in the soil, is it picked up in a traditional soil test, or is it, how do you measure that kind of?
Well, I mean, regular soil test testing for phosphorus levels in the soil, it is a challenge. I mean, most soil tests use an extraction method that's trying to mimic what a plant can see or a plant can utilize in the soil. So you'll get a number back that's actually an indication of an available pool. Doesn't necessarily tell you what that unavailable pool is, and that unavailable pool in a soil can be substantial or very large. Part of the challenge with that unavailable pool is mostly it's bound to something that makes it unavailable to a crop. So in our world, over the last number of years, we've done our best job to try to keep pace with crop removal, putting on what we're taking off. I'd say we've fallen short of that. And if we try to put more on, ultimately, if your phosphorus available pool is low, a lot of what you end up applying is going to build that unavailable pool. Once that's built, we can start building the available pool. We see that with manure. I mean, not to say phosphorus can't be built. I mean, the reason why we have moratoriums in Manitoba is because they're concerned about phosphorus runoff once we get over 60 parts per million. But not to say phosphorus testing of the soil is a challenge, because the extraction, there's 5 different extractions we can use. They're just trying to mimic availability. In the case of crystal green, we kind of are taking that out of the equation. We say soil has no bearing at all on that, because soil's not involved. It cannot tie it up. It's already bound to magnesium in the granule, and the only way that comes available is root exudate. Now, a soil test, if you hit a granule, that extraction may actually solubilize that magnesium phosphate as well and call it available phosphorus. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Yeah.
One more question if we have one from the audience. Oh, sorry, yeah, coming right up.
One comment, one question. Of those 3,000 people versus one, that's 3,000 people that vote as well. Yep. But what happens to the magnesium over time? Like, does it build up in the soil?
So 2 questions. First question is, yes, we're 1 versus 3,000 people that vote. Yeah, that's a challenge. And that is, if you actually went to talk to the president of Ostera and say, you've been around for 14 years, how come you only got 22 cities on board? How come it's taken Winnipeg 12 years to actually implement phosphorus recovery? It's because people in society don't know, they don't get it, and so they don't vote on that. They vote in Winnipeg and which mayor is fixing the potholes, right? Not which mayor is actually cleaning up our wastewater system, putting less phosphorus into the Red River. So that's until it gets to the point where society is fully cognizant that they are part of the problem, and that this is happening in Europe. We're seeing reactors go into Europe very quickly because in Europe, most people in population are surrounded by water. And they realize how important it is to keep that water clean, and they realize they're part of the problem. And so they're accepting this very quickly. Here in Western Canada, I'll give credit to Saskatoon, Portage, Edmonton, Calgary, Regina are coming on board. But it's an issue. People that vote don't fully understand that they're part of the problem. It's easy to blame that one person that is farming and putting on phosphate. Second part of your question was magnesium. When we look at magnesium, it's actually a secondary nutrient. It's used by all plants, probably in a ratio similar to sulfur. And when it's a plant root exudes acid and solubilizes that bond between magnesium and phosphate, it actually will take that magnesium in at the same time. So for the most part, it's not left in the soil. And usually with Crystal Green, we are part of an overall phosphate program, probably in the range of 25%. Some growers are going higher than that. So the total amount of magnesium we actually apply is pretty small. It would be, if we put on 40 pounds of actual phosphate, 25% of that was Crystal Green, that's 10 pounds of Crystal Green. We'd end up with about 3.5 pounds of magnesium. But it typically is taken into the plant right at the same time as the phosphorus. Yep.
Very good. Thank you very much, Craig. Let's give Craig a very good hand of applause. And on behalf of Manitoba Ag Days, here's a token of appreciation.